How's that sounding? Okay? Okay, to begin with, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which our space stands, the Turrbal and Yagara people, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. We recognize their continuing connection to land, water, food, and culture. And then I would like to welcome Ellamay Fitzgerald and Mariam Arcilla. Thank you both for coming. It's such a joy to have you in person to talk about the show, and following on from the workshop, we can dive a little bit deeper into the exhibition. So to begin with, I was curious, I was curious to know, you have a history in photography, and coming into this exhibition, I know that with some of the images you've used digital as well as film, and there are some elements of radios and recorded headphones, maybe kind of leading into a bit of nostalgia. Is that something you thought about in the development of the show?
Well, definitely. Should I? Oh, either way. Thank you, Tay. Yeah, definitely. I think like photography has always been such a big part of my practice. Yeah, I think there's a lot of elements. I guess my background is in film photography, so that's something like professionally separate to my practice that always existed. And I brought that into my arts practice as well. So it's just one medium that I use to do my projects and my work. But yeah, I guess it's also nostalgic because it's something that I've grown up with. And I guess with using like the outdoor radio and things like that, yeah, what can I say without sort of launching into...
Launch into?
Do it. Well, I should give a little bit of context to the exhibition as well. So A Seat at the Table came about from an 18th month artist residency that I did with a program called an arts organisation called Next Wave. And I was a part of their Kickstart program where they invited one artist from every state and territory in Australia. So I was Queensland's artist. And over this 18 months, this is how A Seat at the Table kind of developed and came about. And, you know, I was leaning more, really interested in, you know, food. I was doing a lot of more projects that were more about like my background and to do, you know, making work for and about the Asian diaspora. And so I invited 7 Asian Australian participants to share a meal with me in their homes, alongside a family member or close friends. And I documented that process photographically through film photography. I also think that film is, especially when you're documenting people, it can be a little bit less intimidating instead of having a big lens or camera, you know. And I also wanted to be a part of that process of documenting instead of just being the observer. I wanted to also be a part of the conversation and where it was more of like an equal exchange and not having that power dynamic of being the documenter. And I also recorded those conversations through audio recordings over our shared meals together and our time spent together, which has the outcome of the outdoor radio, which was intentional to have a radio, this being the installation of an outdoor kitchen, something that transports you to something you would, you know, be outside, and the audio of that as well, being a little bit more low quality, lo-fi, was intentional. And then I also collected handwritten recipes from each participant, which I translated with the help of Sam Keneally, who's another artist and participant, her 888 supermarket. That's her story over here. incredible artist in her own right as well. And she helped me translate all of the recipes in each person's handwriting in both their English and their own languages onto the different packaging items that you see in each story. So yeah, that was kind of how, that's a little bit of context of how the exhibition came about. And yeah, how photography was a big part of that as well, but also thinking about how to expand from just being photography into something a bit more immersive and having an installation in the space too.
Beautiful, thank you. And so collaboration really was such a big part of the show. I guess there is a bit of collaboration with photography when you're getting someone to sit, if you're doing a portrait or working with the landscape. I guess it is a conversation as well. But how did you find the collaborative part of this project specifically? And maybe then we'll head over to you, Mariam, as one of the participants.
I think it was so key and essential. My process is very community engaged as well. That's such an important part of the work. And I also think as well, being someone from the Asian diaspora and telling stories of other people from the Asian diaspora, it is inherently like, I feel it needs to be collaborative. It needs to be this equal exchange, and it makes so much sense for us to tell our own stories, our stories collectively together, because there's so much shared experience, lived experience, even across the diaspora, growing up in different places, whether you're first gen or second generation Asian Australian, or if you grew up in Australia or if you didn't. There's just so many similarities in our lived experiences. So for me, collaboration was just key. It was never a question, or that's just what it had to be, especially for the work, having 7 people and that ongoing conversation, checking in at each point and making sure that, I'm so grateful that they trusted me to tell their stories as well. But I think it's also important that I shared my story, so it is that kind of equal exchange. You need to be vulnerable and be open in return. So hopefully that answers the question.
Oh, absolutely, handsome. Thank you. Yes, maybe we'll hear from you, Mariam. I know that you are one of the participants, but you're also a writer and a facilitator in your own right. So I'd love to hear how it was to collaborate on this project, but also maybe touch on your practice and your work with Magenta House and how you work with collaboration in your own practice.
Thank you, Tay and Ellamay. I'm really excited to be here, so thank you for coming today. So how this happened with Ellamay is, I think I was Insta scrolling at night at 2 a.m. or something, and I saw these stories, IG stories from Frances Robinson, who was at Next Wave at the time, and she was doing a call out for Ellamay's seat at the table. And I think it was on the 23rd hour where the Instagram just is about to vanish. And I was goalposts, Ellamay, food. And then I just clicked on it, and then I was this is such an interesting project, and so reached out to Ellamay straight away. And I realized that we had so much in common, not just our passion for food and community world building, but that we had gone through similar grief. Both our grandmothers had passed away during this time, and we have kind of a contentious relationship with our fathers that we were trying to resolve. And there's just so much similarities to how we grapple with living in the diaspora in Australia. And so it was just such a regenerative collaboration to be speaking with Ellamay and creating a work by way of the exhibition essay and submitting a recipe, and Ellamay actually coming to Gadigal land to actually take part in one of our programs. So for context, Magenta House is a gathering and knowledge sharing space on Gadigal land, Sydney, that I run at home with my husband here, who's called Mason. And we do supper clubs, communal feeding sessions, library sessions, test kitchens. We work with lots of chefs and artists and food scientists, and to be able to actually have Ellamay there as a collaborator was just really special because you're able to actually see what kinds of encounters we have through the projects. And in writing the exhibition essay, it was really fantastic to be led into Ellamay's world as you went into everyone's interior worlds and kitchen worlds, and to actually listen to all those stories felt like I was right there next to you in the kitchen. And the reason why I suppose the exhibition essay is called Marginalia and Margarine Tongue Twisters for a Lonely Mouth, that's a very long title, was because marginalia, is the kind of like stain that you see on a recipe when somebody's like been cooking and they have a turmeric fingerprint stain, or a smooshed rice in between pages, or the doodles in a page. So that's what a marginalia is called. And I feel that Ellamay, through working with these seven participant duos, they were creating their own active marginalia through the oral storytelling, through bringing all of you in together here. There's all these different marginalia imprints. So that's kind of how all of this came about, just kept expanding with ideas. Yeah.
I have one more little question for you. In your essay, one of the lines that really stuck with me was talking about every time food lands on the tongue to be savored, chomped or gulped down, a culture is activated. I just think that's so beautiful and so true. Can you just talk a little bit more to that and your experience with that?
I thought I could say a little bit of a snippet of the essay. I suppose you could actually access it online, but I thought to answer your question that might be worth doing my Instagram, because I just posted about it just today. So I'll read the first paragraph of Marginalia and Margarine Tongue Twisters for a Lonely Mouth. And the reason why margarine is included in that is because, to give you context of the title itself and breaking down the etymology, marginalia is often used by Filipinos in the Philippines because there's so much blackouts that we usually try and use an alternative to butter. So we use margarine a lot, and we don't have cow milk because of climate collapse and conditions. So we use powdered milk and carabao, and so using margarine in the Philippines and being so used to that kind of taste, and then coming to Australia and having like cow milk and pepasaya butter was like this weird kind of luxury that's so different to how I taste everything, because everything that, most of the food that you would eat normally in restaurants or in places have, margarine and butter and cow and those kinds of dairy products. So that was the starting point of why culture is activated on the tongue. But so I was just going to read the first paragraph from Marginal. Okay, so marginalia arrives as a paprika-stained fingerprint over a dog-eared page. Sometimes it's doodles of fish or scribbled math decrypting cup measurements. Elsewhere in the ingredients section, rogue advice. Use magic syrup mix instead of salt, which is a Filipino spice powdered mix. Recipe marginalia are the handmade marks, comments, and addendums that skate around the margins of a book or document, stamping clues or material memories with every page turn. Similarly, every time food lands on a tongue to be savored, chomped, or gulped down, a culture is activated. Our body opens itself up to accept sustenance. Its texture, history, method, and process inherited with each bite. So when Ellamay shared the oral storytelling folder, and I started listening to all the stories from the 7 participating duos, I was like, what are they actually called? Are they subjects? But they're more than subjects, they're also collaborators with Ellamay, because they're world building these stories together. And so I guess subject collaborators was what I landed with. I'm like, it's Ellamay okay with that? But yeah, so the subject collaborators, just getting to hear how they activated the recipes through like the sizzling of the oseng, and how like Wendy's mum were talking about the herbal healing soups and how you're drinking bitter melon soup to replace damp heat, or Eduardo's mum talking about how, you know, she has to put a fan in the kitchen because she's got menopause and she's really hot when she's cooking in the kitchen. And so all these memories really landed with me because I come from like 3 generations of chefs and artists. So I was raised in a household of chefs and artists in the Philippines, and so a fan was constantly on because everyone was monopausing their way out, you know, so all of that kind of you know, fanfare and, you know, storytelling and eating and cooking and slicing was just the cacophony of all of that through the oral storytelling was super fascinating and very visceral. And I think that that's what lent itself to the show, is that you can come here and also be part of the marginalia of the process because you're eating the congee, we're having this conversation, we're building on the recipes and ideas that we talk about through the prompts. And so it becomes not just this one event, it becomes really a lifelong learning, like a knowledge bacteria, you know? So yeah, so that's, oh sorry, I turned myself off. Yeah, so it was one of the most favorite collaborations I've ever had in my practice, getting to know Ellamay. Yeah, so thank you, Outer Space.
It's a pleasure and privilege, honestly. That's really beautiful, and I really love the kind of language, and when you were talking about that kind of history and nostalgia and connection, like food has such a capacity to facilitate that connection, and that intergenerational connection is so important. I was wondering if you would be open to talking about that, and that kind of like connection intergenerationally, like vertically almost through lineage, but also like, I think you reference this as like crossing different ethnic borders, so it's almost like a horizontal exchange as well as a so please talk to that how you will.
No, it was, I think the process is always, as with most projects, my most favorite part of the work and creating it, you know. And I think as well, what started with 7 people actually was way more than that. It ended up being, you know, parents, friends, community. You know, when I flew down to Sydney with Mariam and met her community as well. Like, that's just such a beautiful thing to experience and learn, you know. And there were so many funny moments as well, like through creating the project. There would be some parents that would, you know, it ended up being all about them and their stories. They would take over in the kitchen, like, you know, Rebecca here, Eduardo's mum, just like had the kitchen. Ed isn't very good at cooking, actually. And it was really nice to see them cook together. But usually it's just Ed sort of sitting back and, you know, Rebecca taking over in the kitchen. And the same with Linda and her mum, Nee, who are Thai. That actually was quite an emotional one for me, because being Thai myself, and I realised when I, you know, Nee took over in the kitchen, of course, like such a staunch Thai mum. And even if like Linda was doing something, she'd be like, yeah, you're not doing it properly, and they'd just like take over. It was just really funny to watch. But I think that was maybe at the start of this year that I did that with Linda. And I had realised I hadn't had a home-cooked Thai meal since I was back in Thailand in October last year. So that was emotional for me, because my dad lives down in Gadigal in Sydney, and I don't get to see him and my Thai family as often unless I fly down there. So yeah, I think just like it's so, you know, for me, that community engaged process is so important, because I grew up not really having community around me on the Gold Coast, and didn't really have any Asian friends, and so that formed a lot of my, you know, who I am, and just being in the presence of, you know, other people who have those strong connections and grew up with their parents, and hearing, their stories, intergenerational stories, and that knowledge exchange between us was, such a potent, rich, beautiful experience for myself, but also the feedback from everyone in the project to having that sort of not getting the chance to be in a process like that where it's being documented, they're cooking with their parents or with, with Leah, with one of her close friends, Meg. It's just, such a special thing to be a part of, and I think that was a surprising thing, having the intergenerational stories come through. I didn't know how that was going to turn out, what it was going to look like, and going into things, I always try and leave openness with it as well. I don't know how it's going to turn out, and having, the older generation even sharing their stories, them even telling me, or the participants, I guess, that doesn't really happen. They don't, between families, but to be someone else coming in, there's not always that opportunity for them to tell their stories as well, and that coming through and across as what you were saying. Yeah.
Well, I think in these images you just captured that so beautifully, especially in this image here. It has my heart. It makes me very emotional, actually. I just think it's so precious, and aside from being like an absolutely stunning photograph, it's just got such heart. I feel very lucky to see this photo. Like, it feels like a real window into their home. It's very special. So I think you've done an amazing job at capturing that.
I should get some context to that, the larger image as well, which is Juliet and her mum with Yas. And Juliet was the last person that I did the engagement with, because initially she was one of the first people I asked, because there's a couple of people in the exhibition or the project that I already knew, but then there was a lot of people I didn't. But Juliet I did know, and lives on the Gold Coast as well. Initially she came on board and said yes to the project, but then her mum unfortunately suffered a stroke, and so we weren't able to do that engagement, and she had a really long recovery process. But I had then done the open call, which is why Mariam came on board, and the project turned into a much longer project. So towards the end, when I was finishing up the last engagement, Juliet then re-engaged with me and said, I actually would love to do the project with Mum again, because, and you can see she's sitting down in the wheelchair, and it's just such a precious moment to be able to capture that. And having that context to that image as well makes it even more emotional.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And this bottom photo, there is just this wonderful textural relationship with the wrinkles and the age and the wisdom on the hands. With is it tempeh?
Yeah, tempeh, which I said temper.
Temper, yeah. Another tongue twister.
It's like, that's not it.
I feel like that image is very strong. It's so simple, but it says a lot. Yeah, it's really beautiful. Well, I guess I'm curious then. It's such a incredibly special part of the project that you were able to come into these people's home and have a seat at their table and create memories and listen to their thoughts and stories. I have a question for you both. You can take it how you will. What would be an imaginary or real table that you would like to join in? Who would you invite to your dinner party? And what would you eat? I would love to hear from you both. You can take this as silly or as serious as you want.
Oh gosh. I would love to invite my Palestinian friend who is stuck in Gaza, and her name's Mona Head. And she was supposed to come with her 4 kids and her husband to do a book tour, because we have her book in our shop. So we run a shop at Magenta House, and it's called Tabkha. And so she spent a year writing her recipes from the rubble in a mobile phone, and it's been published. And so she was supposed to come here on compassionate terms, and her visa was approved, but really last minute it was overturned, and so she's still stuck there, and things are just really horrific right now because of the apartheid, and it's just really like kills me. It just pulverizes me that that this is happening right now. And so having Palestinians at the table, fucking yes, sorry for the swearing, but that would be my answer, to have Mona and everybody from Gaza safely being able to actually have self-determined lives and livelihoods and cultural traditions preserved, and to be able to fish and to grow more olive trees. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
And Beyonce as well.
Beyonce.
No. Beyonce's fine with her own table.
I actually don't know, but I guess for me, it might be a cop-out, but I guess like going back, being able to go back to Chiang Mai and being at the table with my grandmother, who I didn't really, we've only sort of been together 4 times or met 4 times, so I think like having all my family at the table together, or being in the outdoor kitchen back home, being transported there and hearing like everyone just talking in Thai around me. I have no idea what they're saying. Just like yelling, everyone's laughing, drinking, hearing like gin cow, which means to eat or eat rice, but you can say it generally to eat. Or just like, the fussing over and like eating till you literally feel sick, and eating with your hands, and picking and eating all together. Like it's just, for me, that's just so core, essential, where I feel like I belong, and something that I missed out on a lot. So I guess that would be definitely who I would have at the table. Just people yelling in Thai at me all the time to eat more.
Yes, that sounds beautiful, and beautiful answers. Thank you. I guess I'm curious now that you've spent time doing a few iterations of the outdoor kitchen. How are you feeling about the workshop kind of component of this, and the questions and the sharing that happens there? I know we've talked briefly about this being a quite emotional kind of part of the project. I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about the questions and the sharing.
Yeah, for me, recreating this central installation of the exhibition, which inspired by my trips back home and being in that space. It's also a representation as well of where all of the engagements took place in everyone's home kitchens. And so it was a little bit of how I could impart some of myself and my story into the work. I've never actually made work directly about my own story and background, and it's always telling other people's stories, and I guess indirectly mine through other people. So it was a way I could gently nest and set up a gallery space to feel like that sort of sense of belonging, a home, a warming space where people felt invited into. They could sit down and be a part of it, and touch things, or touch the artworks, and that was all very intentional, instead of being a sort of a stark gallery space. And so I really wanted to activate this area in the gallery. And it is, the 4th time that I've done outdoor kitchen now. It's happened, I did 2 showings down in Naarm in Melbourne and 1 on the Gold Coast, and then this was the last one. But for me, I really wanted to, I guess the provocations, I wanted to also people for them to feel they could drop in, feel grounded, with the provocation at the start where I got everybody to close their eyes and transport themselves back to a memory that feels safe. I think acknowledging as well everyone's relationship to food was important, because not all food memories are pleasant, and some can be linked to trauma, as what came up in some of the stories in this show, which is why some participants chose to do it with close friends and community instead. It's so layered, and so I think that it was important for everyone to sort of go on that journey together, and I wanted, and having gentle instructions to do so, I really wanted to try and have a work that was participatory. People could be engaged and have a conversation over congee, and perhaps meet somebody new, discover something new, return to a safe place, really try to get these kind of conversations and core memories out, and just see what happens. And being able to meet everybody individually as they came up to receive their bowl, having everyone go back and have a conversation and then come back together at the end. I guess it, as well as the start, being able to share a little bit about my story, hopefully, that allowed people to open up as well and trigger certain things for them, to then feel safe to share at the end. Hopefully that answers some of it.
No, it absolutely does. I feel like it not only activates the work and activates the photography in the show, but it's a work in its own right. There's so many facets that are very special, so congratulations. I was just wondering if any of you have any questions that you yourself would like to know, or anything that you've been mulling on that you want these two to extend on. So I'll hand it over to the audience. Take your time.
I suppose while we wait for somebody to talk, I could just talk about how I learned something about myself when Ellamay came, and because all the questions that you were asking, because I work behind the scenes. I'm like work in the shadows. I'm an arts worker, so I don't usually get interviewed or asked about anything. I don't do these kinds of talks at all. And so when Ellamay was asking these questions, one of the things that I realized was the term hamstering, which is in one of the audio pieces that Ellamay asked me about how why I was interested in test kitchens and experimenting in the different types of taste palettes and mixings, similar to how Ellamay had this congee today with all these fusions. I used to raise hamsters, and I would just be obsessed with how they would just chew things, and it would just be these little puffed up balloons in their cheeks, and I would just eat my desserts first, and then my savory food, and then sweet on the right side, savory on the left, sweet on the right side, and then I would literally chew them together and then swallow them in my throat. And then so that made me so obsessed with test kitchens when I was an adult. And so that whole idea, I would never have realized the journey of why I do certain things, without actually being asked about those things. And even realizing my first word as a kid was kitchen, and then my second word as a kid was chicken, and then that started my life as a dyslexic because I kept getting confused by say let's go into the chicken to eat some kitchen, mummy. And then so that, just even those kinds of things, it doesn't have to be a food memory that is oral. It's actually a lexicon that is so associated with food that actually makes you who you are, kind of thing. So so it was really great to kind of banter and talk about those things, and Ellamay creating that kitchen world where you can actually have those conversations, and it didn't feel like a Q&A or a question that was posed to you by somebody who was outside of that realm of reality or familiarity, was just really freeing. And so, yeah, and I can see that with all the other subject collaborators as well, as the ease in which they were able to share their stories, because it just felt so authentic and so from a place of collective, collective incantation and understanding. Yeah. Sorry, nobody even asked me that question, and then I answered it for you.
Well, is there any thoughts that you have, Ellamay, anything that you'd like to leave everyone with?
Yeah, I just also wanted to shout out to Mariam for listening to hours of conversations of when you were talking about, that's how you were, that's what drew you to write the exhibition text, and the active listening that you did, because a lot of the conversations went for 2 hours. It's like from the start of preparing a meal all the way to eating it and chatting and drinking at the end. So yeah, such a, kudos to you. It was just incredible. And the exhibition text that came out of it just blew me away. So I just wanted to give a huge thanks to that. And I think as well, I flew into state to do 2 of the participants' engagements. And it's really interesting and different when it's out of context of the Gold Coast as well, Southeast Queensland. It was such an incredible experience to go down and experience Magenta House for the first time, and how Mariam, brings people together at Magenta. And so I learned so much from that experience, and the stories that came out of that, and all the memories and everything that you shared is, that's the connection. For me, that's the most important part of the work, or why I even create, is because of being able to meet people like Mariam and form that connection and that relationship. It's community, at the end of the day. And so, and that's how I hoped that the exhibition would translate across just how important that is, how important collaboration is, and how people from the diaspora really do need each other. It can be really hard sometimes to have that sense of belonging in any place that you are. And so, I learned so much from Mariam, and and I just feel so grateful that everyone came to experience Outdoor Kitchen as well. And it's a new work. I haven't done participatory work before, so yeah.
Thank you. Well, on the topic of newness, if I may be so bold, I didn't put this question down and ask you if I could ask it, but I'm going to ask, what is next? What do you feel like this work is pulling you towards? Do you have a rest planned? No work, just rest? Or is there another project kind of bubbling away?
So, I guess to answer it really briefly, thank you everyone for listening for so long. But I remember being down in Nam and meeting a new person who was also from the Asian diaspora, from Malaysia. And I went and saw a show that they were a part of. And we had a conversation, and they said, oh, this is the second show I've done, but the first time I've ever told my story. It's always been other people's stories. And I think that's what I feel like, from having everyone share so openly in this project, has given me the courage, I guess, to finally share or tell my story, and it's such a complex thing, because it can be linked to so much emotion and trauma and all this stuff, and so I think that is something that I want to work towards as being the next thing. But of course, for any artist as well, with long-term projects, the last 2 projects I did were both 2 years long. Usually I need minimum 12 months to regain my stamina to re-embark on a new project. So all next year will be rest.
I'm really glad to hear that. You're busy. So rest, and then some new work on the horizon. That's really exciting. Well, we might wrap it up there if that feels good for everyone. We have a little bit more time in the space, so if you're feeling shy and have a few questions, please come up and ask. But thank you all for coming today, participating, and listening to talk. It's been really special. So thank you. And thank you both. for coming.
Thank you,
Thank
Tay.
you, Tay.
Thank you.
Thank